What's up, everybody? This is Wired from Junk Robot, and I'm bringing you the Dragon Age 2 Warrior Specializations. These are the talents, skills, and bonuses that were not present in the demo, and this will help you get a good look on what you should expect when you start playing your playthrough of Dragon Age 2. The first specialization we're going to take a look at is actually the most evil one, and that's right, it's called the Reaver. The Reaver gives you a natural bonus of 5% to all elemental and physical damage when you choose this specialization. So now let's actually take a look at some of the Reaver's skills and talents. The first ability in the Reaver specialization is actually called Blood Frenzy. It requires level 7 and actually works in this way. Every time you take damage, you begin dealing more damage, up to 200%. Depending on your current life. It's actually a passive ability, so this is an ability that will always be active. Next up in the Reaver tree is actually called Sacrificial Frenzy. It actually upgrades the Blood Frenzy ability. Basically, you sacrifice 20 health to get double the damage from Blood Frenzy. It lasts about 10 seconds and the cooldown is 25 seconds. So this is a nice little ability to boost your damage up even more. However, it does have a pretty short duration. Thirdly, in the Reaver tree is actually called Sustained Frenzy. It actually upgrades the ability Sacrificial Frenzy. It requires 3 points in Reaver and level 13. It basically only lowers the cooldown of Sacrificial Frenzy by 5 seconds. The next ability up in the Reaver tree is called Devour. It requires level 8 and also requires that, you be a Reaver. The Reaver tears into an enemy, consuming its life force, healing the Reaver. It does 10 physical damage and regenerates 10 of your health. It also has a cost of 20 stamina and a long cooldown of 1 minute and 20 seconds. It's actually an activated ability, so this will be on your attack bar and you'll have to actually use it for it to work. Next up in the Reaver specialization is called Voracious. It requires that you're level 12 and also requires that you took the prerequisite Devour. It makes your Devourer become so vicious that enemies are automatically staggered, leaving them open to devastating follow-ups from a Mage or Rogue. It increases Devourer's physical damage by 3, health regeneration by 3, and also staggers the enemy 100% of the time and has a 100% stun chance versus normal enemies. It's obviously just an upgrade. It upgrades your Devour skill. Next up in the Reaver specialization is Insatiable. It requires that you're level 14 and also requires that, of course, you have the prerequisite Devour. Devour is now much more effective, particularly if a rogue has lowered the enemy's defense. It increases your physical damage on Devour by another +3 and health regeneration by another +3. It also causes your physical damage to do 300% more damage versus disoriented targets. Health regeneration regenerates 300% more health from disoriented targets and lowers the cooldown of Devour by 20 seconds, making it 100-second cooldown. Next up is the top tier talent for the Reaver called Aura of Pain. It requires that you be level 10, also requires that you have Blood Frenzy and Devour. The Reaver radiates psychic pain, dealing spirit damage to himself and his enemies. It actually does 5 spirit damage per pulse and requires 5% of your health per pulse. Its pulse interval is 4 seconds and the size of the pulse is 6 meters. It's actually considered a sustained ability, which means it costs stamina whenever you're using it, which means it lowers your top end stamina by 10%. So, an example, if you had 150 stamina, you'd actually only have 135 when using this ability. Moving on, in the Reaver specialization, we come to Torrent of Pain. It requires that you be level 14 and also requires that you, of course, have Aura of Pain. It also requires that you have 3 points at least in Reaver. The Aura of Pain now causes greater harm to enemies without increasing the player's own health loss. It's an upgraded ability and also increases the damage to your Aura of Pain by 3 damage per pulse, at no cost of life to the player. The next talent in the Reaver specialization is actually called Frenzy of Pain. It requires that you be level 16 and also requires that you have Aura of Pain. It also has a secondary requirement of having at least 5 points in the Reaver specialization. Aura of Pain now consumes less health to maintain as the Reaver's health decreases. This is an upgraded ability. Obviously, this ability works when you're lower on health. It helps to offset the penalty of having Aura of Pain on, lowering the requirements the lower you are in health. The last talent in the Reaver specialization is actually called Fervor. It requires that you be level 13, but also has a secondary requirements of not only having Sacrificial Frenzy, but also Aura of Pain, and 3 points at least in the Reaver specialization. The death of a foe quickens the Reaver's actions, which increases your attack speed by 30% when an enemy dies. It lasts 10 seconds and is a passive ability. That brings us to the end of the Reaver class, so next we're going to be doing the Templar. The next class we're taking a look at is called the Templar. Chantry members who have devoted themselves to hunting down anything called a mage or anything having to do with the spiritual energy. They get an inherent 10% damage boost against any spellcaster and any fade creature. They also have a lot of nice little lockdown abilities and even some damage boosting abilities, but mostly they excel in the stopping and draining of enemy mages. So if you want a defensive kick with a little bit of a damage twist, Templar might exactly be your specialization. First up in the Templar tree is called Cleanse. It requires level 8 and also requires that you are obviously a Templar. It purges the area of hostile magic, removing hostile magical effects, and it disables sustained magical abilities from enemies, meaning if they have a buff on or anything like that, this will completely remove it from them. It has a dispel chance of 100%, size of 6 meters, and also costs 20 stamina to use. It has a decent cooldown of 30 seconds, and it is obviously an activated ability. Next up in the tree is Cleansing Wave. It requires level 12 and also requires that if you, of course, took the prerequisite Cleanse. It also requires a secondary 2 points in the Templar specialization. Cleanse now purges a larger area of magical effects. Basically what it does is increases the size from 6 meters to 10 meters. It's obviously an upgrade power. The final cleanse ability is called Lasting Cleanse. It requires that you're level 14 and also requires that you, of course, have taken the cleanse ability. Points required in Templar are 4. Cleanse blocks enemies from using spells or talents. It basically turns Cleanse into a double duty spell, allowing you not only to wipe all debuffs from your party, but also to remove all buffs from the opponent's party and silence their casters for 10 seconds. Next up in the Templar tree is actually called Holy Smite. It requires that you're level 7 and also requires that you, of course, are a Templar. It has a secondary requirement of having at least 2 points in the Templar specialization, and it gives you this. The Templar strikes out with Condemning Fire, inflicting spirit damage on nearby enemies. It deals 24 spirit damage, has a size of 8 meters, and costs 35 stamina, with a built-in cooldown of 25 seconds, and it is, of course, an activated ability. Next up in the Righteous tree is Righteous Smite. Requires level 11, requires Holy Smite, and the points required in Templar are 2. Holy Smite becomes more effective against opponents who depend on magic. It deals 200% more spell damage versus spellcasters and fate creatures, and it's obviously an upgrade. This ability alone will make you even more of a mage slayer. Next up in the Smite tree is called Staggering Smite. It requires that you have level 13, Holy Smite, and also requires 3 points in Templar. Holy Smite now has a chance to stun foes. Stun chance is 50% versus normal enemies, and of course, it's an upgrade. The third tier talent in the Templar specialization is called Silence. It requires level 12, Cleanse, and 2 points in the Templar specialization. Templar surrounds a foe in negative energy, preventing the enemy from activating abilities. A silence chance of 100%, lasts 20 seconds, 25 stamina, and has a cooldown of 45 seconds. It's obviously an activated ability, so make sure to put it on your bars if you do get it. The next ability in the Silence tree is called Lingering Silence. It requires that you be level 12 and also requires that you have taken the ability Silence. Its secondary requirement is 4 points in the Templar specialization. Silence can now be used more frequently, lowering the cooldown of Silence by 10 seconds, making not only Silence's duration 10 seconds, but its cooldown 10 seconds as well. The next skill in the Templar tree is called Righteous Strike, not to be confused with Righteous Smite. It requires that you be level 10 and also requires that you had taken Cleanse and Holy Smite. The Templar's weapon is instilled with Righteous Energy. Each strike has a chance to silence the enemy. The silence chance is 10% versus normal enemies. Duration is 4 seconds and it's a passive ability. Basically, it turns your auto attack into an ability that can possibly silence with a 10% chance. The last skill in the Templar tree is called Annulment. It requires that you be level 15 and also have picked up both Silence and Righteous Strike, not to mention invested at least 4 points in the Templar specialization. The lyrium infusing the Templar's blood protects the Templar. The Templar gains resistance to all forms of hostile magic. Basically all it does is increase magic resistance by 50% and is a passive ability. Well, that wraps it up for the Templar. I hope this mix of anti-mage and silencing abilities has really tweaked your interest in playing the Templar, as it seems to actually be fairly strong. Up next is the last class of the warrior specialization called the Berserker. It's really a nice class for anyone who likes to get down and dirty and use his stamina to the best of his abilities. Now we're on to the final specialization for warriors, the Berserker. If you like getting down and dirty and using stamina to its greatest effect, this is the specialization for you. First and foremost, you get a base 10% stamina regeneration ability as soon as you choose the Berserker specialization. Not to mention it has great synergy with its skills that include increasing damage depending on how much stamina you have and things like that. So instead of getting into it now, let's take a look at all the skills and let's see if the Berserker might be the specialization for you. And the Berserker wouldn't even be a Berserker if he didn't have the ability Berserk. It requires level 7 and also requires that you play as a Berserker. The Berserker flies into a rage, landing powerful blows while the mode is active. The damage is plus 10% of your remaining stamina, and the cost is minus 4 stamina per hit. The cooldown is 10 seconds and is a sustained mode. Next up in the Berserk tree is called Endless Berserk. Requires that you be level 11 and also requires Berserk. It also has a secondary requirement of 3 points in the Berserker specialization. Berserk rages are now less tiring to sustain, meaning it costs minus 2 stamina per hit. It is obviously an upgrade to the normal Berserk. The last skill in the Berserk tree is called Savage Berserk. It requires level 13 and requires, of course, the ability Berserk. Points required in Berserker for this to become unlocked is 4. Berserk now inflicts more damage for every point of the warrior's current stamina. Damage increases by plus 5% of remaining stamina. This obviously upgrades regular Berserk, so instead of doing 10% of remaining stamina, it now does 15% of remaining stamina, and pure damage boost. The next ability in the Berserker specialization is called Adrenaline. It requires level 8 and also requires that you have picked up the Berserk ability. Points required in the Berserker specialization are 3. For a short time, the Berserker taps into deep reserves of energy to make each strike more powerful. If the Berserker activates Adrenaline multiple times, its effects are additive. Berserk must be active to use this ability. Damage stacks plus 5% each time you use the Adrenaline ability. It lasts for 8 seconds and costs 20 stamina, and its cooldown is 2 seconds. Next up in the Adrenaline tree is the Adrenaline Rush. Requires you to be level 12 and also requires obviously Adrenaline. It also has a secondary requirement of 3 points in Berserker. Adrenaline can now be used as frequently as the Berserker desires. Basically, it removes the cooldown from Adrenaline, allowing you to stack it as many times as you want. It is obviously an upgrade to the Adrenaline power. The final talent in the Adrenaline tree is called Adrenaline Rage. It requires your level 14. Also requires, of course, that you have the Adrenaline talent. Points required in Berserker are 4, and the Adrenaline's damage bonus is now much larger, particularly when the Berserker activates the talent multiple times. The damage stacking adds up, so it gives you another bonus of plus 3% per stack. This is obviously an upgrade to the Adrenaline power. Next up in the Berserker specialization is Barrage. It requires level 9 and also requires Berserk. It has a secondary requirement of at least 3 talent points in the specialization tree. For a short time, the Berserker trades protection for speed, lashing out with rapid blows, but takes more damage from enemy attacks. Berserk must be active. Basically, it gives a nice bonus of plus 50% attack speed, but you lose 20% damage resistance. It lasts 10 seconds and costs 20 stamina, and has a 30-second cooldown. Next up in the Barrage tree is Unrelenting Barrage. Requires you to be level 9. Requires you also have Barrage. Points required in Berserker is 3. Barrage now lasts longer. It adds a 10-second duration to your Barrage, obviously upgrading it, causing your Barrage to last for now 20 seconds. The final skill in the Barrage tree is called Resilient Barrage. Requires you to be level 15, have Barrage, and also have spent at least 4 points in the Berserker talent spec. The Berserker now takes less damage while Barrage is active. So basically it cuts the damage resistance penalty in half. This might be useful for those of you guys that like Barrage a lot, but are also find yourself getting hit a lot. Next up is the top tier talent for the Berserker specialization. Requires level 15, Adrenaline, Barrage, and 5 points in the Berserker specialization. Each time the Berserker fells an enemy, the thrill of victory restores a larger than normal portion of the Berserker's stamina. Stamina regeneration is a minimum of 5% upon enemy death, based on the enemy's rank, meaning the higher the rank, the more stamina you get back. This is a passive ability and it's always active. With that, we come to the end of our warrior specialization guide and kind of overview. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and please, if you did, rate, comment, and subscribe.